2024 for the Slugs is kicking off strong with our first full-length cast. For the majority of this episode, I'll be joined by the current world number one, both the Dark Lord and an honorary slug. It is, of course, Morgan Reid. Morgan is going to help us unlearn all we have learned as we discuss primary units in Shatterpoint and extrapolate all we can from Morgan's 2023 online league domination. Then, the top slug Cameron will be jumping on the cast, where we are both going to be interviewing Michael Watson, who's going to advertise Shatterpoint at CanCon and discuss other upcoming Australian events this January. My name is Tom Harper. All of the music used in our content is of course composed by the omnipotent Gabriel Fisher. Links to where you can check out and follow his projects are in this episode's show notes, along with timestamps for this episode's segments and all the places you can check out and support our content. If you love what you hear, please consider joining our Patreon. A massive thank you goes to Kevin C, Arfsarfs, Siren, and Winter AU for being our first paid members. It means an incredible amount and we cannot wait to bring you more content. A special thanks also goes to the Zion's Finest podcast for their recent glowing review of our content here at the Slugs. If you haven't, definitely go and check them out as well. Now, join me as we continue our exciting journey into the domain of Star Wars Shatterpoint.
You don't know the power of the
All right, shut up.
of the dark. Dark.
Who's the more foolish, the fool or the fool who follows it?
It's a trap.
Kid, I flew from one side of this galaxy to the other and seen a lot of strange stuff, but I've never seen anything to make me believe it.
G'day everyone, you are listening to Space Slugs, a Star Wars Shatterpoint podcast, and very, very excitingly, we have Morgan, the Dark Lord, joining us for our very first full-length episode. Morgan, thank you so much for being here.
Harp Daddy, it's an honour to be on the Slugs inaugural cast. Much appreciated.
No, not a problem. Thank you so much again. We've got a really, really good and exciting episode coming up. So look, I'll just quickly talk about what we want to do. So in this first episode, or this first segment of the first episode, we're going to be conducting an interview focusing on Morgan, your online league domination. You've back-to-back won the TTS League. Are you excited, happy, proud?
Yeah, I mean, pretty surprised actually. The game's so new, and I suppose I didn't expect to be this successful for an online event so early because learning the game, I think I lost my first 10 in a row and I wasn't very good at it. So I've come a long way in a short period of time. So quite surprised and feel quite privileged to do it. And it's good to have this platform to be able to play games worldwide. It's been great.
Definitely. So just for a little bit of background, essentially what's happened is we've had an online simulator called TTS. You've seen it on our Twitch and our YouTube. You can check out all those games. But we have a seasonal sort of format. And Morgan, you actually, as I said, have won season number 1. And you did a really, really good interview on a podcast called Hello There. And I can put the episode link in the show notes. That was a fantastic interview where you essentially went through all of your approach to list building and squad building. So we won't really go over that again. But if you could just summarize maybe Premiere roster principles that you took to season 1, and then we can compare and contrast that to season 2.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's worth doing. So good shout. Firstly, that was the first time using Premiere format. So it was an unknown for me and probably everyone else who was doing it. But I decided I was running Dark Side and Sith stuff. So I thought it was appropriate to use a Sith rule of 2. Very thematic, and it kind of made sense in my mind anyway. And so the basic premise is each team you run has 2 frontline brawler units you just want to throw up in the middle and go and distract your enemy. 2 diceless displacement units to allow you to swing those objectives and score the points. And they're really the workhorses of point scoring. And then 2 objective sitting potato units who just sit at the back and score points. And that's the rule of 2. 2 of each of those. And that is the premise of a strike team. And in the Premier format, each team you take would have 2, 2, and 2.
It's poetic, really, isn't it? Very, very poetic. No, that's a really good way to approach it, and I think you've obviously had a lot of success. And we can get into the sort of diceless displacement versus out of activation displacement, etc., a little bit later on. But first, that was your season 1 approach. And then for season 2, I just want to have a think about maybe what changed. So just before we get into that, there were a few format changes that we'll touch on. So season 2 grew a little bit. It was 93 players across 4 different brackets. So we essentially break down, your time zone, so everyone can play in a time zone of their choice, which is really good for shift workers, or it doesn't mean that UK people have to play against Aussie people all the time, which is just a pain to organize. Now, it was a 5-round Swiss in each bracket, and the top player from each bracket would go on to a single elimination top 4 called the Duel of the Fates, and that's what you ended up in, Morgan. And then essentially it also had 2 side events as well. So everyone that was 1 loss or greater that didn't win the event would essentially move into a top 16 player single elimination round or bracket called Never Tell Me the Odds. And that was, for me, it was something that I was lucky enough to get into. And then there's also a casual league called This Is Where the Fun Begins. So that's a lot of side brackets, just to highlight that. But Morgan, you got into the top 4 called Duel of the Fates.
Yeah, and Tom, by the way, congratulations for you getting into the final of the side event of Never Tell Me the Odds. And I know you're champion Anakin for that, and you're awaiting your soon-to-be, opponent that you're going to play in the final.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's been a great journey, and it's been really fun to rep the chosen one, Anakin.
Don't we both? Just in different ways.
Just very different ways, absolutely. So that's the Season 2 format. I know that Season 1 was Premier. You had to bring a Premier roster. Season 2 was open, so you didn't have to lock in anything. But I do note that every single one of your games, you played the same thing. So break down your Season 2 team for us, and if you could tell us what changed between Season 1 and Season 2 in terms of your approach.
Yeah, no worries. Look, so firstly, I think that the context is important here in that Season 1 finished, I can't remember, it was maybe late October, and Season 2 started literally the week after. So normally for events, for myself, I'm not sure about other people who are listening or Wargame, is that if there's a big, time difference between events, it gives you time to tinker, test, try new things, and then take something different. Because this was literally the week after, and I was so focused on the top cut of Season 1 and just playing the premier roster of those 4 different squads, I'd invested all of my time and energy into that. And so when Season 2 rolled around a week after the final, I had played nothing else really since. So I just defaulted to what I enjoyed the most out of my premier format for Season 1, which was Vader and Maul. And that's what I played. So it was Vader, Django, Arf, and then Maul, OB2, and the Super Commandos. And that was a team I just took, and I didn't really think much more about it. I just kept playing it the whole season.
Yeah, so that, again, follows that Sith rule of 2, which is really cool, even though Lord Maul is not a Sith at this point, but we can ignore that. So we've got a diceless displacement in Django, in the Vader squad, and we've got a diceless displacement in Maul, in the Maul squad. And yeah, I mean, it's successful. It's done really well. And you took it to the W. So that's, again, a massive congratulations. So I think there's a few questions that we want to go into in terms of your approach, because obviously you're doing something correct. So the first thing that I wanted to ask you was how or if you formulate an approach to each game after the priority roll is done. Like if you sat down up against my Anakin and Obi roster, what would be going through your head in terms of where to put your units and what things you want to match up against?
That's a really good question. What I want to do before I answer that is just give a quick shout out to Tobias Ford, who's Desert Spiral, I think, on Discord, as the other finalist for Season 2. I think it's just important to acknowledge his run. A fellow Australian, and the irony is that he's a Queenslander and lives around the corner from me, and we play each other every week. In fact, I'm playing with him this afternoon. So we do a worldwide event and we end up playing the local person in the final. But well done, Tobias, for a great run. So I just want to shout that out. Hey, look, back to your question. Really good question. And for me, for any war game, and Shatterpoint is one of them, it's the same sort of processes that I use and develop and then apply. And I've tried to condense this because I know you sort of forearmed me with this question before we did this podcast, and I've thought about it and I've tried to condense my thoughts to be digestible for people driving along and listening or running along and listening. And really up front, for the Shatterpoint context, I view strategy as a general approach, and I view tactics as the application in game, so that the actions you take to achieve your strategy. And really, and I'm getting to the point of this, but the strategy and tactics are really a combination of art and science. And science is the theory, so the theory of how things should work or how you should do things in a game. But really, the art is bringing everything together from your experience and your theory, and then applying it in tactical action. So that's a bit of a preamble, I suppose, to how I approach wargaming in general, and it is applicable for Shatterpoint. And I'll just pause there for any comments, Tom, before we get on to, I suppose, the three-step process that I'll use.
No. Drive ahead. This is great.
All right, hey, interrupt me because I don't want this to be a monologue. But so first one, step one. So you've asked, how do you approach your plan or whatever it is after you've done the priority roll? Well, step one for me, I think of it as battle space analysis. So this is a simple step, and any beginner listening to this podcast can do it. And really, this is about science. It's just about the theory. And so battle space is the terrain, and it's the first consideration that I weigh against my own strike team's mobility. Do I have jumpers? Do I have jetpacks? Do I have anyone with scale? If I do, I'll have a bias in my mind of placing them on a side of the table or deploying them on a side of the table which is elevation heavy or similar. The second part is, the ground dwellers, the ones, the squad in my team that is less mobile to elevation, I'll try and put them on the more open part of the battlefield that has minimal elevated terrain, or it might have some really good access to ingress points. And then the general observations and assessments of really how the terrain may shape and influence both my plan and my enemy's plan. There might be some key or decisive terrain on the battlefield that will limit or allow certain things to occur. And step one is really just about doing the analysis of that. As I said, it's simple and most people can do it if you just pause and give yourself 30 seconds to look at the map.
And I know we're about to get into the second point, but I do want to just ask, you've got a battle space analysis, and then you're also having to consider maybe your own characters in that realm. I just wanted to know, and I know this is all dependent on the priority roll and a lot of extra context, but are you going to prioritize battle space flexibility and synergy, i.e. terrain with jumpers and flat with ground dwellers? Or would you rather or prioritize your matchups, as in your characters against enemy characters? What would be your most important thing?
That's a tough question to answer definitively because I think it will be subjective to a whole bunch of stuff. But if you hold a gun to my head, which you are right now, and saying pick one, I would pick the terrain shaping my own placement as opposed to opposing matchups.
Yeah, I think I do agree. And without derailing this conversation too much, we did play a game last night, myself and Cameron, and we saw the new Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker almost completely ineffective in his first few activations because of terrain. So he might be matched up against what you would consider a really good character for Luke to fight. But if he can't enter that battlefield effectively, then it doesn't matter who he's fighting. He's not going to be able to get there, right? So I think battlefield analysis and making sure that you've got your jumpers on the right side and your ground dwellers on the right side is probably penultimate. Would you agree?
Yes, terminology, I might say it's ultimate, but maybe it could be penultimate. I don't know. It depends what your first consideration is. But I agree. I think for early on in the game, in my mind at the moment, I'm more about the mobility of my team suiting the side or biasing towards the side that has the best terrain for them. And then everything else after that is kind of incidental, or we'll make the best of a bad situation later. All right. Are we ready for step 2, Tom?
We're ready.
All right, this is where the fun begins. So step 2 is the enemy analysis. So step 1, we've gone through the battle space analysis, and we've just baselined what the map is doing and what the terrain is doing and how we think it's going to impact. Now let's look at the enemy in some more depth. So I want to analyze the opposing strike team. Now there's 2 parts to this. The first part is a general evaluation. And for people listening, this is kind of intermediate level of analysis. If you're a beginner at the game, you probably won't have the skills and experience to be able to do this yet. But as you build your knowledge, you will be able to do this. And this is really a combination of the art and the science. There's a bit of theory here, but there's also a bit of experience and, I suppose, implications you need to consider. So the first is, how has my opponent built their team? And what is the team trying to do? So has my opponent built a heavy attrition team? Is it a heavy displacement team? Is it a Dooku Talzin, which is heavily reactive trigger-based? Or maybe Obi-Wan Kenobi can fit in there as well with his knowledge and defense. Is the team heavily reliant on out-of-activation mobility, like a droid or separatist list? And really the big one is, what weaknesses do the opposing units have? And what I'm trying to do is just run through this list of things. It doesn't matter what order you do it in, but this is just general observations. And by answering each of the above, it helps me formulate in my mind how my opponent will likely approach the game, which in turn informs what their attempted path to victory is going to be. And so part one is a general evaluation. What's their team trying to do? What weaknesses does it have? And therefore, what's it probably going to do on the table? Which really leads into part two, which is the course of action analysis. But I'll stop there, Tom, and ask if you've got any questions on the part one of enemy analysis.
Yeah, no, not immediately. I guess maybe an example. Maybe you could run us through, if ready, maybe run us through how you evaluated this against your top match against Desert Spiral or Tobias.
Yeah, okay. So he was running a list, I've got to remember now, it was a couple of weeks ago. It was Padme and Plo Koon. So it's a Republic team, and it relies on out-of-activation mobility. It had Rex, it had Ahsoka, and it had Plo Koon. And Padme, that's 4 units who can, out of activation, move other units on the table. So in my mind, his team, and I'm not giving this a lot of thought to be able to answer this with great clarity, but in my mind just now, his team is based on these triggers to move them between objectives, to put objective pressure on me by putting characters up there early and then moving them rapidly between objectives to try and keep the scoring pressure up. It's not very resilient. So its weakness, in my mind, would be lightsabers or lots of shooting. So he can move his characters around a lot, but if they're wounded, they're not really scoring. So that's just an example of, hey, what is my opponent's team trying to do out of activation mobility? What weaknesses do they have? Well, clones are pretty weak source and they can die easily, so therefore they're vulnerable to damage. And that's just a quick example.
Fantastic. Yeah. Okay, that's great. I think we can move on to part 2. That's a really comprehensive little summary.
Cool. All right. So step 2 was the enemy analysis. Part 1 was a general evaluation. Part 2 is now the course of action analysis. So this is more advanced level of analysis, and this is more art than science, because this relies more on experience, more on reps played, and more on the understanding of what your opponent's units can do. So based on part 1 of what we think their strike team is trying to do, and then inferring what we think their optimized playstyle is, this allows us to determine the opponent's course of action for each of their units. So what is each unit likely to want to do? Example, does a Super Commando want to come and punch me in the face? Does a Barriss O'Fay want to come and displace me? Do some ARF troopers want to sit at the back and camp on an objective and do some pot shots and coordinated fire? And that really, they're just examples, but that course of action analysis allows us to think about and forecast what actions, abilities, and effects that the opponent will likely use to achieve their overall plan. And whilst we cannot accurately predict a draw order because of the mostly random draw order, we can make some assumptions on reserving units and preferred activation order, plus really objective aggression. So, for example, if my opponent's got a Darth Vader, they might not want to activate them early. They might want to wait for me to bring a unit to the midline so we can waltz up and murder them. And so really the summary of the course of action analysis is going, right, we've thought about what our opponent's team can do, and we've made some inferences about what we think it's going to do. What are the actions they're actually going to take? So if actually visualizing, what is that opposing unit going to do? Where does it want to move to, and what actions does it want to take? And that's really the course of action analysis, working through how our opponent's predicting how they're going to play the game. And again, I'll pause there for questions or comments before we go to step 3.
No, this is really, really. I'm taking notes actually, so this is great.
I want to do a general comment at the end of this, because I think there's some good points that come out of this, that a lot of people will do this stuff intuitively but not be able to put vocabulary to it. Anyway, step 3, Tom, should we do that?
Yeah, let's jump in.
All right. So step 1, battle space analysis, looking at terrain, how it affects our team. Step 2, enemy analysis, looking at what our opponent's team should be doing and probably how they're going to do it through some predictive analysis. And step 3 then is friendly analysis. This comes back to our own team, and we're looking at here, this is more strategy of our own team. So how have I built my team? So the examples I gave before for the enemy analysis, like what have I actually done with my team? What is my team trying to do? Do I want to do heavy attrition? Do I want displacement? Do I have trigger-based effects, etc., etc.? And then really as well, the opposing weaknesses that we identified, in step 2 for the enemy analysis, how can I target those? So we said in the example for the Tobias game in the final that I thought his clones were weak to lightsabers. Really, that's an opposing weakness that I can target because I've got some high mobility lightsabers that can run up and hack at them. So that's I suppose an opposing weakness that we can target. And then lastly, for this part, it's what tools do I have to counter my opponent's plan and advance my own plan? So looking at again what the enemy's sort of team is built to do and what they want to do, let's look at our team and go, well, what in here stops that? So my enemy really likes out of activation mobility. Well, I've got Jango Fett, and I've got ARF troopers who've got PIN. So that can interfere with my opponent's plan, plus advancing my own. So that's really the strategy about, hey, how can we approach it in the friendly analysis? And then the tactics part of it, which is the art of it, is based on all this analysis so far, where do I apply my tools to exploit my opponent's weaknesses? How do I defeat my opponent's predictive plan and advance my own plan? And therefore, what actions do I need each unit to take to enable this to occur? And that's effectively it, a 3-step process. Battle space analysis, how does the terrain impact the game? Enemy analysis, what are they trying to do and how should they play it optimally to do it? And then friendly analysis, what have I built my team to do? What opposing weaknesses can I target? What tools do I have to counter my opponent's plan and advance my own? And then what actions do they actually need to do to enable all this to occur and for me to win the game? And that's it, Tom. Follow this 3-step process with steak knives and you'll win Shatterpoint.
Wow. Okay. No, that's amazing. Thank you so much for that deep dive. So I guess in how quick a time frame do you think you're running through this? I mean, battle space analysis, that takes place almost before the priority roll has been done, correct? You're going to run in there, you're going to look at that table, you're going to talk about terrain with your opponent, have a look at some ingress points, and bang, you've done battle space analysis. And then are you deploying whilst you're doing enemy analysis, or are you where do these tiers or orders come in?
So it's like any, I mean, I'd view this as a skill, really. The more you practice this skill, the better you're going to be at it and the faster you're going to be at it. And as I said before, just a small segue is that I think most people do this. And I think wargamers do this naturally. They might think of it in different terms and they might label them different things, or they might subconsciously do these things. But this is just consciously, I suppose, providing a framework and then labeling those things. And so, yes, battle space analysis in my mind happens as soon as you rock up at the table. Before you even know who you're playing or what you're playing, you're just looking at the terrain going, okay, this is kind of what it does. And then I just do it in the order. Next up is, hey mate, or lady, what are you playing? And then as they're saying that, I'm just thinking about what those things do. And this is where it becomes the sort of the art and the experience part, is that the more you play, the more you'll intuitively know these things. Like, hey, I know I'm facing Padme Mace again for the millionth time. I know exactly what it's trying to do. And then the part 3, the step 3, about the friendly analysis, well, you should be pretty much set. Like, you should be knowing that before you turn up to any game because you know how you've built your team. Right. But really what we're looking at there is just what tools do I have to counter this particular nasty plan my opponent has? And it's just consciously going, right, Django's got pin or blah, blah, blah's got blah, blah, blah. Just those things. So it happens pretty quickly. I'll do all of this in under a minute and I'll be doing it evolving as I'm deploying the team. But hopefully before I deploy, just depends how tight time is.
Yeah, okay. No, that's a really good breakdown and a goal, I guess, we can set our audience to achieve or communicate, etc. So that's a really, really good breakdown. I guess the next thing that I wanted to ask, you were playing Maul and Vader beautifully in the Season 2 League. We've got CanCon coming up this month, which is a really exciting thing, and stick around until later on in the podcast. We're actually going to get Michael on, who's the TO of Cancon. But do you think that this is going to be more complicated when you have to do all of these analyses with a Premiere roster? Are you going to actually start looking at, okay, well, I really like Vader. I mean, he's my core, and I really don't like Mace. So then I'm going to use Maul to try and displace Mace. How much thought are you putting into the actual matchup, do you think? Or is it just sort of put what you want on the field because the game's still young enough to do that?
That's another really good question, and I do think you've hit on a good point that the game's young enough to have a general approach now, but this will evolve over time. And I think at the moment it will largely be, and CanCon's going to be around 30 players plus for Australia, and all the sort of top-rated players from Australia are all play online. So Tom, you know as well as I do what most of us play. And so when you and I are matched up and I see you've got Anakin and Obi, I'm probably thinking you're going to play Anakin and Obi. And if you want to do a pump fake into a different team, well, great, because you'll be less experienced with it. But so what I'll probably do is just go, okay, who am I playing? What are their two, their four squads? Right, I know Tom, he always plays Republic. He'll probably do that, right? And then I'll just apply the best team, which I think is against it. But having said that, if I went to a blind event, I'd be focusing on the battle space. Hey, which of my teams best uses the terrain available? Looking at the opposing matchup options, going, well, geez, he's got two different teams or they're pretty similar or whatever it is. I'll pick my best all-rounder. So it's a bit hard to say, but, you've just got to do something that you're comfortable with. And if in doubt, this is great advice from the old X-Wing days from you and I, Tom, is play what you know. Always, in my mind, I'll rather play what I know well than try and do some sort of meta counter with something that I don't know very well.
I always thought that the advice from X-Wing days was, if in doubt, roll out. But I guess maybe that's why you were so successful in X-Wing, and I was just a scrub.
Well, there's a bunch of X-Wing advice. One was about list building. One was about being a coward. So.
Very true, very true. So look, that's a really great deep dive on Season 2 and Morgan's success, and I think the listeners will get a lot out of that, so thank you so much for providing that. Now, what we've also done together is draw a lot of data from Season 2, and I think this is probably one of the most exciting things that we can present to you guys, the audience, as some content creators. So what we've done is I've gone through all 396 games or matches from the Season 2 League, and I've pulled the data from it. And we're going to try and compare and contrast that data to the overall data. And what we use for that is something that we've talked about on the stream and on the cast before, is Longshanks. So this is a tournament organization software. A bunch of different games use it. X-Wing used it for a little bit. MCP uses it quite a lot. Guild Ball, I think it was originally designed for. And all of the statistics and all of the uploads and everything that you can possibly ask for are contained in this tournament organization software. It's completely free, with a few, at base, there are a few features that you can pay for, but it's completely free for everyone to access and use. And I would really highly encourage everyone that is thinking about organizing an event or running an event to use Longshanks. So that's essentially what we're drawing the data from. And what we really wanted to focus on today was primary characters, because that's what we can essentially infer from this data, and their popularity, what they prefer pairing with, or what the most popular primary pairs are, and just to see how the first 6 months of Shatterpoint has really shaped up. Morgan, did you have anything to add on to that?
I think it's worth saying, Tom, that from memory, you've biased towards rated data on Longshanks. Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah. So basically, this will be approached from a competitive lens, and so that is why we are going to use rated-only data. There are a few exceptions, just because sometimes the rated and unrated data is incredibly close, despite the rated amount of play being a lot lower than the unrated. But yes, this is going to be a competitive look at the state of Shatterpoint for primaries, and we will therefore only be using rated data from Longshanks.
And the implication, or the inference there, is that when people go to a rated event, that we assume, which is not going to be the case all the time, but we assume they're going to try their best to be successful as possible. Therefore, they want to take the most competitive list they can, as opposed to unrated, which might be more thematic and casual focused. Is that right?
Correct. That is correct. Yeah.
All right, let's dive in. Where we start?
So what we've done, and this is our first step, is just looking at individual primary characters and their play rates from Season 2 of the TTS League. And so overall, 885 total games were played, which were 885 individual instances of someone rocking up with a strike team, which essentially dumbed down into 396 accurate data points that I could grab. And we're just going to look at the most popular individual primary characters. And first up, to me, which was quite surprising, just because I haven't had that much success with him, was Dooku, with 14% of games played featuring Dooku. What do you think about that?
Count Dooku, the most popular character for TTS Season 2. Interesting. I like you, Tom, we're aligned in many ways. We might both be right or both be wrong. Probably the latter. Is that I'm not a huge Dooku fan as well. I find his strength to be largely in your opponent's hands in that his triggers and his good stuff relies on your opponent to enable it to occur. But having said that, he's quite a safe character to play. He's quite simple to play, and he's got some cool stuff. So he's a bit of a feel good for playing him, I think. So I am surprised he was the most popular primary at 14%, but it makes sense.
And interestingly enough, when we compare that to all the games played historically that are rated, he is also the most taken primary. So the Season 2 data there definitely matches up with the overall picture as well. So Dooku on top is basically the the picture that we're drawing there. The next up is, I think relatively unsurprisingly, Lord Maul at 13% of all players, and then Talzin at 10%, roughly 10% of all players taking Talzin. And they make more sense to me, not only because they have, melee and ranged attacks, which I think is something that we could probably touch on as valued. And they also have diceless displacement. Maul with his There Is No Place to Run, and Talzin with her Manipulating Hand. Any thoughts on those two, Morgan?
Yeah, good shouts. And, it's not surprising also because they pair well together, the Maul and Talzin Dathmirian piece. The bit that I did want to highlight, Tom, if you want to expand on, is that when you compared Talzin at 10% for the TTS League, the broader across the rest of the world, Talzin's only taken 5% of the time. So we've got a double showing. Is that surprising to you that it's way twice as popular on TTS than it is in real life?
I actually do think that that's a little bit surprising, to be honest. I think Maul and Talzin, Mother Talzin here, a Dathomirian, pairs well with so much. I mean, you've taken her with Vader, you've taken her with Maul, you've taken her with Dooku. We see a lot of pairings for her and a lot of potential play. She brings a really good set of features. So yeah, maybe when the game gets a little bit older, she'll start spiking a little bit more. And I think maybe her necessary take rate, or i.e. like how often she should be taken, is represented in TTS Season 2. I think that is sort of where she's at. She's a really great character in my mind, and I think she probably should be taken more overall, outside of that TTS Season 2 league.
Yeah, that makes sense. So the top three, Dooku was the most popular, Maul was the second most popular, and Talzin was the third most popular. Tom, who came lucky last here?
The Grand Inquisitor came lucky last, and he only was taken 2% of the time in the TTS League. So that's a bit of an unfortunate showing for the Grand Inquisitor, but probably something that I'm not entirely surprised about. I think that he's probably one of the least impactful primaries at this stage. I think there might have been one or two dice missing from his kit. What do you think?
Yeah, so balance-wise, I think the Inquisitor box is the worst balanced box that AMG have released so far with current releases. That might change when Big Daddy Vader comes out, who's an Empire character, but they're undercooked in my mind, and a bit disappointing because they look so cool.
They do. All the red blades in the world. So we will touch on the Vader box maybe a little bit at the very end of the episode and how that can impact the Empire at large. So they might spike up a little bit, which is exciting. But yeah, Grand Inquisitor taken 2% of the time, which is, again, I don't think very surprising. He's sort of Dooku light. He's got a very similar defensive profile, but worse because he can't modify dice results. He doesn't bring as much force, and he's only got a 4 dice ranged attack and a 5 dice ranged attack, respectively. So a little undercooked. So what we'll do next is they're the top 3 and the bottom 1. I do want to have an honorable mention to the Dark Lord, Lord Vader, or Darth Vader, Jedi Hunter. He was a close 4th at 9.9%. So just underneath Talzin, and I think that's probably worth mentioning. But I think it's really interesting that, your top 1 and your top 4, so Dooku and Vader there, they are characters that can only influence one character at a time. I mean, I can't bring Dooku in to completely take over a point, assuming that my opponent has 2 characters there. And that's the same as Vader. I mean, he can probably confidently handle a character or a unit, but he won't be able to handle or impact the game if there is 2 characters on one particular point. Any thoughts to add to that, Morgan?
Mate, that's accurate. So what that tells me is that Dooku requires some other synergies to make him, I suppose, a stronger choice. He's a popular choice, but doesn't mean you can just put him anywhere and he functions by himself. He might excel, and I think he does excel with other separatists. And the Vader piece, you've nailed it. Vader relies on dice. Luckily, the dice are consistent in this game so far, but he's all about moving and one-shotting things.
So I just find it interesting that, they're so popular. I mean, Vader's heaps of fun to play. I don't particularly find Dooku a lot of fun to play, but I guess the package that he brings, being separatists or reactive, etc., quite a lot of fun. So interesting data for me, but really exciting. And I mean, it's consistent as well. So not only are we seeing a high propensity or a high proportion of players bringing these individual, I mean, this makes sense, but Dooku is also paired quite often, and I think our primary pairings are our next step, unless you have anything that you want to jump in and focus on.
I do. I just want to highlight, so we've spoken about the popularity of these characters, and Tom, you spoke about Longshanks before. Anyone can jump on Longshanks right now and click statistics for Shatterpoint, and you don't need to subscribe. It's not behind a paywall. You can look at the individual win rates of every primary. Now, just to summarise that for people, is that every single primary character released as of 2nd of January 2024 in Australia has a win rate of between 54% and 45%, which is good, except for two, because that 45 to 55 in my mind, and I'm not sure if AMG have stated this by the way, but in my mind that's the bell curve of where we want primaries to be. There's only two characters that fall outside of that, and the first is Grand Inquisitor, who's at 44% win rate, and the last one is actually Anakin, your boy, at 43%. So popularity is cool, but then performance, as I said, every single character released at the moment is between 54 and 45% in their performance, which in my mind is acceptable and balanced, except for GI, who's a bit low, and Anakin, who's a bit low. That's the only thing I wanted to add, Tom, before you go into pairings.
Yeah, no, that's a really good way to segue into it. The win rates do change a little bit when we start pairing these primaries up, but I think it is really, really important to note that the game is at this 6-month stage, such a healthy place in that, everything falls in between that arbitrary sort of balanced register of between 45% and 55% win rates. I think that's great. And then anything that sort of sits outside of that are probably something that competitive players are going to gravitate towards and look at. But I don't think anything at this stage, and I can confidently say this, I don't think anything at this stage is out of hand or out of whack and needs to be changed. Maybe things need to be brought up, like the Inquisitor box, but I would stick to and die on the hill that everything's pretty good at this stage.
No arguments here, Tom.
No arguments. Okay, that's good. The silence was making me anxious, but I'm glad that we concur. So how do these primary pairings match up? I mean, look, we're going to look at primary pairings as the most accurate sort of level of data that we can provide you guys, the audience. Unfortunately, there's no way to bring in secondary and supporting data as of yet, but I do think that Longshanks is working on that behind the scenes and will hopefully be able to release that at some point in 2024, which is super exciting. So we'll get the full picture of Shatterpoint data. But before we do, the way that we gather this data is via list submissions. And I do just want to put a little bit of emphasis on the fact that when you guys play an event or submit a strike team or a squad at an event, I'd highly encourage you guys to use and submit via a thing called an SPT code. So a lot of the squad builders have these inbuilt, and they're just really, really simple and easy ways for a roster to be imported into Longshanks. But it also has the double effect of presenting quantifiable data, which is really, really good and exciting, not in terms of primaries, but in terms of secondaries and support. So if we want to get those features live on Longshanks, submit via an SPT code. It's probably on the builder that you use to build your rosters anyway, and it just helps me and data miners and Longshanks, of course, paint a bigger picture for you guys. So Tabletop Admiral have them. Point Break has them, and I can put all the links in the show notes so you guys can start using these squad builders. But that's just something that I want to talk about before we jump into the pairings at large. So Morgan, how about we look at the top 5 primary pairings in TTS Season 2, and then we can compare them to all games played or the overall picture. What do you think about that?
Nice. And when you say top 5, you mean the most popular pairings, not the highest win rate pairings?
Correct. Yes, sorry. That is correct.
Yeah, so give me, Tom, I'm listening now, what were the top 5 most popular pairings for TTS Season 2?
Okay, so the most popular at 11% of players taken, which is a lot of games, was Mother Talzin and Lord Maul. So that's number 1. Count Dooku and Cad Bane was second most popular, which is really interesting to me, at 9%. General Obi-Wan Kenobi and Jedi Master Mace Windu were at 7%. Count Dooku, again, and General Grievous at 6%, and that was tied up with Count Dooku and Mother Talzin at 6%.
Okay, so really dark side heavy. Thank you. It's interesting stat, Tom. There has been, and this is not making a subjective assessment, but there has been some media on Vader and General Grievous as a potentially strong team. Was this not well represented by competitive TTS players?
No, so Vader and Grievous was actually only taken 6 times, just a showing of 1.5%, and they only had a 50% win rate to boot. So that's not a fantastic showing, and that is, I think, maybe very counter to the community sentiment at this stage. Would you agree?
Okay, no, that's interesting because generally speaking, from other game systems, if something is popular on or vocal on various media outlets, then that could be gravitated towards. It's interesting to me that it has been topical in some recent, and not just one or two, it's been a couple of different areas, yet it's not popular at all. So I found that interesting.
So with those top 5, that they're the top 5 most popular. But I think what we could do now is dive into what we deem as the most successful primary pairing win rates. We've noted that, for example, Dooku and Cad featured in 9% of overall games, so a really, really popular showing. They had a relatively poor win rate of only 39%. So, Morgan, how about we talk about some of these primary win rates, and I'll hand over to you for a little bit.
Yeah, okay, nice. So this time we spoke about most popular on TTS for pairings. With the primary win rates, we're now going to talk about, Tom, and correct me if I'm wrong, we're talking about Longshank's rated recorded data since the game has been released. So this is not TTS Season 2 specific. This is across every game ever played, rated on Longshanks. What is the most powerful, by the numbers, primary pairings? Is that right?
That's right.
Okay, so it's interesting to note that I just want to reinforce what Tom said about the secondaries and supports. They tell a big part of the story. And because we don't have that, maybe you can't just take the 2 primaries and throw whatever you want in them with them and be as successful as these numbers represent. But you can make some inferences about what you're taking with them. However, we're going to go to above 55%. So that bell curve, Tom, we spoke about before, of 45 to 55. Anything above that, we'll highlight here. Anything that falls within that bell curve, we won't highlight it. So we're only going to go for 56% win rates or higher. Are you happy with that?
I think that's a really good idea. And I think that this is painting a really interesting competitive picture.
Do you want to start at number 1? Start at number 1 or start at the bottom at number 13?
Actually, you know what? Let's start at the bottom at number 13, and then we can talk about some of these really interesting points as we go up.
All right. This is actually, I like this. I like this start. This is a really strong start. So out of the 13 premier pairings that are above 55%, number 13 is Vader and Maul, and that comes in at 56% win rate across the game's life to date on rated events. Tom, comments or just go straight into number 12?
No, I think that is really interesting, and it's fitting because this is what you just won Season 2 with, right? So 56% win rate, it must be doing something correct, and it has, again, some really strong synergies there. So you got Vader, who's really quick. You got Maul, who's really quick. You got a bit of diceless displacement, and it's probably just a really fun sort of rule of 2 Sith Lord red lightsaber squad to bring.
2 red lightsabers, baby. Can't go wrong, unless it's Grand Inquisitor. Number 12 is Vader and Talzin. So this is Jedi Hunter Vader. We don't have the new Vader released. And Mother Talzin comes in at 57%. So that's number 12 placed. Comments or number 11?
I think we'll go to number 11. Just quickly say that Vader Talzin probably offers something very similar to Vader Maul in that they have ranged attacks, diceless displacement, and a big beat stick like Darth Vader.
I like that. Vader and Maul is proactive in my mind. Vader and Talzin is more reactive in my mind, and it's pick your poison. All right, number 11. This is a bit surprising to me. Ahsoka and Luminara come in at 58% and number 11 overall. Comments?
Ahsoka and Luminara. I don't have any comments. I'm just sort of racking my brain. I'm assuming that that's going to be with a Mandalorian shell, and that it appears as quite a force efficient roster, and some reactive abilities there as well. Luminara's heals, Luminara's wounds, and Ahsoka's dashing and advancing out of activation. So interesting. Not what I would have expected, just in terms of them paired together. But really cool to see that.
Well, it is good, and I'm not sure we said at the start, but we did a minimum of 10 games. So this is not just like one game of Ahsoka and Lumi. This is at least 10 games, and from memory, this has been played quite a few times, actually. And Tom, some of the strength might be in what you said, is that we're racking our brain going, huh, what is this? And there's something to be said for all war games, that if you bring something that's a bit unusual, it catches your opponent off guard, and both of those characters can catch you off guard. Number 10, Tom, Vader and Dooku comes in at 58% and the 10th overall strongest primary pairing for 2023.
That's very interesting. And maybe, Morgan, you'd be in the best position to comment on this, because this was what you used to win the final game of Season 1. So any thoughts on this pairing? In my mind, it doesn't really synergize outside of the fact that it brings you 8 Force, and that's sort of it.
Yeah, that's about right. You can make some synergies. There's a couple of obvious synergies in my mind. The first is you could make it a separatist synergy. So leveraging Dooku's reactive triggers, you could run. Actually, you're right. There's not a lot of great synergy here, apart from 8-4. So it might be Dooku, Jango, Magnas, and then you could go Vader, Kraken, and B1s, and you have some Dooku synergies with his separatist stuff, and Vader can just throw a red lightsaber, and you've got 8 Force. So there's a few ways to do it, but I think it's just 8 Force and pick your poison on your best secondaries and supports.
Yeah. I do think it's maybe worth mentioning that at this stage, almost every single one of, I think all but one, being Lumi and Ahsoka, all of these top-rated primary pairings have all featured each primary with a ranged attack and a melee attack, which is interesting. You've got Vader doing his lightsaber throw, Maul doing his lightsaber throw. I think that might be something, a bit of a trend.
It is. I mean, we can segue on that, but man, I'm really not a fan of characters that only do melee attacks. I'm a huge fan of ranged and melee, and I try to avoid like the plague melee only.
Yeah, no, we'll put a pin on that, and we'll talk about that at the end, maybe some closing thoughts. But we'll proceed.
All right, so number 9 of the strongest squads or teams, I should say, is Vader and the dreaded General Grievous at 59%. Tom, I know this is a little pet favourite of yours. Vader and GG, 59%, number 9 overall.
I mean, that's a good win rate. I do think that there are some really interesting ways to build this strike team that aren't including some of those characters like Fifth Brother and stuff like that. I mean, Grievous is great, but he's just another Vader in my mind. So I think this is a really good, maybe beginners to intermediate bashing strike team, in that you can come in, people are not really prepared for maybe the amount of violence that this can produce, and it just kind of catches you off guard. But I think this will go down. And I mean, we've seen that in Season 2, right? It didn't have the same impact. It only had a 50% win rate, and not a lot of people brought it because I don't think that people think that it's that strong. Does that make sense? Does that ring true to you, Morgan?
It does. So I've tried this a bunch of times. It is not on my list of best Vader teams to play. However, this is the best seal clubber I've seen in this game. And if you want to go club some seals, take Vader and GG. If you want to play against a good player, it's not so good in my mind.
Okay. All right. Crack on.
Strong thoughts. All right, number 8, Dooku and Luminara. This is a strange pairing, but they're number 8 overall, and they've come in at a 60% win rate.
That is interesting. But again, it's got some reactive gameplay, right? You've got a primary character in Dooku that has a melee and a ranged attack, and you've got probably the primary with the biggest board presence in the game in terms of ability and identity, but probably one of the weakest individual activations in the game in Luminara. So it doesn't surprise me seeing Luminara up the top, just because the capacity for shenanigans is so high with her. What do you think?
I think there's a recurring theme on a couple of these pairings that we can hit at the end, but I want to flag Dooku and Lumi as a reactive primary pairing, and which you can discuss a bit more at the end. Mm-hmm. All right, number 7, Mace and Padme at 61%. Tom, you're a Republic player. Why aren't you playing Mace and Padme?
Yeah, so I don't own the Padme box. That's point number 1. I endeavor to get it, but it's just not on my radar at this stage. Mace, I just find incredibly boring. Morgan, I think we can segue a little bit. You went to an event in Queensland, I think in November or December, and you played 3 out of 3 games up against Mace and Padme. Was that correct?
It was. And that was, honestly, I felt like quitting Shatterpoint at the end of it. I'm like, this was I mean, lovely people. It's not about the people. It's like bashing your head against a brick wall. For me, it's not enjoyable to play against. And yeah, that's the same reason why I wouldn't play it. And also, I really don't like the Padme box aesthetic.
That's fair. That's fair. No, so it's just not for me. I much prefer big swings and a lot of board presence, and I find if I have to commit mace too early, it just frustrates me. The gameplay of that character frustrates me a little bit, and I don't like bringing a 3-point secondary. That's predominantly sort of where I'm at, but it's effective. It works really well. I think Tobias and another really great Australian player, or a number of really great Australian players, predominantly Starstone or Olek in the Space Slugs Discord, he's done really well with all things Mace and all things Padme.
Now, Tom, spoiler alert: this is the highest ranked Republic primary pairing. Is that in your mind at 61%? I mean, that's pretty strong showing. Is that the appropriate highest ranked Republic pairing?
So I think it's good to remind people that we're just going off of currently released models. So the reason that Plo is not appearing on this list is because he's not on the street at this stage. So that's worth just keeping in the back of everyone's mind. I think that when Plo comes out, we will see a little bit of a difference and maybe a couple of different play styles. I think maybe Plo and Obi-Wan Kenobi will be a really good pairing, as will Plo and Mace potentially, because there's a lot of things that you can do to impact the board outside of activation. There's a lot of movement. There's a lot of coordinated fire shenanigans with the amount of movement that you can generate. So I think that will be a good showing. But at this stage, I do think that a 61% win rate with Galactic Republic and Mace and Padme is fitting. I think they both offer some really good ways to impact and hold firm on the board.
Nice. Now, it looks like I've just lied by saying that's the highest Galactic Republic win rate when I look at the number 6 placed, which is Vader and Ahsoka, because I remembered that Vader has the Republic tag. Does Ahsoka have the Republic tag?
As does Ahsoka. She does. Yeah, not the Jedi, but she has these. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of breaking the theme of actual what people think of Republic, but it is technically Republic, so I apologise. Vader and Ahsoka comes in at number 6 at 67% win rate as the highest placed tagged Galactic Republic win rate.
Not in spirit, but yes, tagged. Absolutely. So interesting that we're seeing Ahsoka here.
It is. Again, flagging a reactive triggers here, which is her jam, isn't it? All right, Tom, so we push through the top 5.
Yeah, let's push through the top 5.
All right, number 5 is Dooku, and Tom, this is going to make your heart sing. Your boy Anakin, but not your boy Dooku. So number 5, Dooku and Anakin coming in at 67% win rate. Talk to me about this one, Tom. Why, if you're an Anakin player, are you not playing Anakin and Dooku if it's winning 67% of the time?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great showing, right? That is a really, really strong showing. 67% of the time is 12% higher than what we consider balanced pairing. So something's going right here. I think this probably unlocks Anakin's potential with 8 Force and Refresh, and it probably means that you can be a little bit more aggressive with Anakin. You can just throw him forward, you can throw your secondaries forward, and you can rely on Anakin to do those big game-winning swings, which he is renowned to do. So maybe this is something that I should investigate more. I have played a lot of Dooku Anakin, and it just didn't feel right, maybe thematically, but also mechanically. I mean, I'm sure someone much better than me is making this work, but Dooku, I don't know. You have to bring relatively weak units alongside both of these 7 squad point characters, and it just didn't feel fantastic.
Fair enough. Number 4 is, and this is my original favourite pairing, and I still love this pairing, I need to revisit it, is Vader and Asajj Ventress. Comes in at number 4 at 68% win rate, with almost 100 games played. So this is a really strong showing, which is interesting because the community seems a bit down on Asajj, and Pagani, our man in the hot seat for AMG, said Asajj was the strongest character in the core box, and I wouldn't disagree with him. Or probably I would. I'd say Maul is just because he's easier. But no one can swing points like Asajj can. And man, this is such a strong pairing, Vader and Asajj at 68%. What do you think, Tom?
I think this is, in all honesty, one of the best pairings in the game. And I think the only reason that I'm not using this is because Vader means no Anakin. So at least for CanCon, I'll definitely be bringing Anakin just because I have so many games with him. But I love this pairing. I think Asajj sings under Jedi Hunter Vader's identity with all of her synergies as well. She heals herself. She can take damage from Vader to spike dice. She is fantastic when paired with Vader. So I think, if you guys want to make Asajj work or want to investigate that a little bit, chuck her down with Vader and see how it goes.
Absolutely. And what's interesting, I've played this a bunch, and this was my first Vader Love squad, is that Vader plays second fiddle here, and that I, Shatterpoint Asajj almost every time and just swing, Makashi's side. So it's interesting that that's probably the only team I've played with Vader where he's the backseat driver and Asajj is the star.
And I think it's worth noting, and this is a bit of a spoiler alert for the top 3, Asajj never features again. And she is really dropped out of favor with the community. And I wonder if that's a player skill thing or the fact that she is a poor character, or maybe it's a limitation in building rosters around her in the Premier format. But maybe we can put a note in and talk about that later.
Yeah, I've definitely got some thoughts on that, but we'll run out of time. So let's go to number 3. So number 3, this is a bit of a, not a core box special, but kind of, is Lord Maul and Luminara at 68%, number 3 overall, which is really looking at that Mandalorian efficiency from the core box. Tom, number 3 overall. Are you surprised that such a simple Mandalorian squad is so strong?
No, I'm not. I think this is great. I think there's a lot of efficiencies here that can be looked at. And if you guys want to see this in action, you can go and check out our YouTube. A man by the name of Soup plays this very well. And there are some really good examples of the efficiencies of this squad. And it just looks like a lot of fun to play. All the Mandalorian characters are great. Maul's great. Lumi has a fantastic identity. It's just really good. Simple and nice.
Nice. All right, we're getting to the pointy end here. Number 2 overall in Shatterpoint for 2023 is Dooku and Mother Talzin at 68% win rate.
So a couple of these themes are coming back. Dooku is back and Talzin is back. Both of these guys have ranged attacks. Both of them have strong melee attacks as well. And both of them have a reactive trigger. So I think this is a theme that maybe could be investigated a little bit more. What do you think, Morgan?
Let's see what number 1 is to see if it also has a similar theme. But this one surprised me. So the number 1 Shatterpoint team for rated Longshanks data in 2023 primary pairing is Dooku and Ahsoka at 71%, which is the standout winner by 3% as its next rival. So number 1 overall, Dooku and Ahsoka at 71%. Talk to me, Tom.
I think that's really interesting. I think it's really, really interesting. Reactive, we've seen that. One of the primaries has a ranged and a melee attack, and Ahsoka has board presence due to the fact that she can consistently move and attack people, even when she's wounded, if your allied characters get wounded. So she's got a lot of board presence, and I think she has a really good combat tree to push people around out of her activation. So yeah, reactive seems to be really, really heavily on top, which is very, very interesting. I mean, Dooku, he's omnipresent almost in this list here, but Ahsoka pops up a few times as well, and she's a character that I haven't explored. What do you think, Morgan?
So this is a fascinating list, I think, of the best performing primary pairings. I want to ask you at the end, I just want to plant the seed now, whether you think, Dooku and Ahsoka is the best Shatterpoint team or not at the moment. I certainly don't think it is. It's performing the best, but I don't think it's the best by a long shot. But I think the theme that you touched on earlier, which is worth bringing up, is that a lot of these things are reactive in that when you go to wound someone or do some violence, Dooku, Ahsoka, Talzin, Luminara, they have a reactive ability to then catch your opponent out. And I wonder, Tom, whether these reactive teams have such strong showings because the game is new and a lot of the player base are at the beginner or intermediate level. And if you're at that level, in my mind, you forecast poorly the reactive triggers and you plan poorly for the reactive triggers, and therefore you get caught out by them and it costs you the games, basically, and the win rates. So I think these teams are far less effective against strong or advanced players who know and understand what they do. They have to play around it, which has its own impost, but they're far less effective. Is that you're not doing gotchas to seals, basically. So that's kind of my thoughts on why. I'm keen to get yours, Tom, though. Does that ring true to you, or am I off base here?
No, I think that does ring true. And I think that there is something that we could quickly highlight that I think a lot of people still aren't aware of, in that you can stop your tree prematurely. So you don't have to, if you get 5 successes, go 5 up your tree. And against characters such as Dooku, Ahsoka, Talzin, Maul, all of these characters with reactive abilities, stop the tree and leave them on 1 health. Make sure that you've conditioned them out and you've put them in a precarious position, and see what happens. And I wonder if that win rate will significantly change with that knowledge or that approach.
Now, Tom, the question I asked before is, do you think Dooku and Ahsoka is the best Shatterpoint team? Now, this is highly subjective. I don't think it is, but I mean, can you go, yeah, you know what, I can get behind that. That's the strongest team in Shatterpoint right now.
No, I can't. I don't think it is. I think, this is sort of coming back to what we were talking about before. Dooku is good. He has a range and a melee attack. Ahsoka does not. I think that the best team in Shatterpoint would be one where all of the characters in the strike team have impact on the board at all stages of the game, in that they can melee and they can ranged attack as well. So something like Dooku Talzin makes a lot more sense to me, and maybe Vader Maul, etc. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I concur, like Leonardo DiCaprio. One of the things I did want to say as well, just on Ahsoka, I don't want to harp on too long, but I think she's very easily countered, or maybe not countered, mitigated by the popularity and ease of access to pin via Django. Ahsoka's worst nightmare, the primary, is pin, and that really shuts down her identity. So, for my mind, Django is too common and too strong in the meta to play Ahsoka to her full potential at the moment. Tom, having said that, are we good to now go to what is the absolute worst pairing, or do you want to talk any more on the top sort of 13 pairings that are above that 55% win rate?
No, and look, I think we can go march on here. I do want to say that if you guys have any questions or want to discuss this further, jump onto the Slugs Discord and have a chat with myself and Morgan. We'd be more than happy to talk until the cows come home, I'm sure. So yeah, if you guys have any questions or comments, chuck them in and we'll get back to you.
All right, give us, Tom, what is the worst pairing that you can play in Shatterpoint right now?
It is Asajj Ventress Sith Assassin, there's a theme, and Cad Bane Notorious Hunter with a win rate of 24%. So steer clear, I guess, guys.
So here's my challenge to you, Tom. Will you take this as one of your teams for CanCon and play it and try and get a win with it?
So Cad and Anakin is something that I would like to explore a little bit. But I would also like to try and win CanCon. So maybe not at this stage. Maybe CanCon 2025.
So you're a coward. Got it.
I am.
All right. Tom, let's do the other thing I want to touch on is just for our listeners, core box. Where is Anakin and Ahsoka at versus Asajj and Maul? Do we have their win rates?
We do, yeah. So Anakin Skywalker paired with Ahsoka actually only has a win rate of 29% in the rated format. Quite a few games, but only 29% win rate compared to Darkseid, Asajj and Maul with a win rate of 44%. Now that Asajj Maul pairing is something that I've been trying to have a look at for a while, and we can talk about this online, maybe on the Discord. But I've been really struggling to make Asajj work with Maul, and I almost feel that pairing is too efficient, if that makes sense. It doesn't make any sense at all, but I feel like no matter what you draw in terms of your Shatterpoint cards or your order deck early, it just doesn't feel very comfortable. It doesn't feel like it flows naturally to me. So regardless, 44%, it sits slightly outside of what we would want in terms of 45 to 55, i.e. balanced or expected. But yeah, slightly outside. Thoughts on the differences there, dark side, light side?
If you're sharing a core box with a mate, take the dark side and crush them. That's my thoughts. Hey, Tom, in this list of top 13 that are above 55% win rates, who appears the most? So can you give us the numbers on how many times of the characters appear in there?
Yeah, so before we get into who appears the most, I think in terms of, listeners, maybe you're new, maybe you're experienced, and if you've got this far, great. But in terms of value for money, I think this is worth looking at in terms of, maybe the core box or whatever box that you want to buy first. So that's just a little bit of context. Now, who appears the most? The most popular is Darth Vader, Jedi Hunter.
Now, Tom, when you say the most popular, Darth Vader, Jedi Hunter, is the most common character in those 13 primary pairings that are above 55% win rate. So he's the most common pairing that you can pair with other people.
Yes, sorry, that is exactly what I meant. Yep. So who's number two?
Dooku is number two, and then Number 3 is Ahsoka and Luminara equally. So there's a good value box for sort of Ahsoka Core and Luminara. I think that's pretty handy. Tom, number 4.
We've got Maul and Talzin equally popular there.
Nice. And then the last, also the 5th most represented is Anakin, Asajj, General Grievous, Mace, and Padme. So that's a pretty good spread. Tom, give us some so what's out of that.
Yeah, okay. So I think Vader is probably, in all honesty, the easiest plug and play primary at this stage. So it makes a lot of sense to just grab his box and whack him on the table. And I think he's got an impact. He can just sort of hold a flank by himself, and he's also the Dark Lord. So I think that makes a lot of sense that he's going to be so popular, right? Dooku, I mean, we've talked about, I think, the strength of reactive abilities and just some synergies. The Separatist boxes and Separatist identity is just really fun. And Maul, I think that rings true as well. I mean, he's in the core box, so he's the most popular core box character at this stage, and he's just awesome. I mean, you love him, right, Morgan?
I do. I didn't initially. He was my placeholder until Vader arrived. And when Vader arrived, I was busy playing Vader with everyone else. But I came back to Lord Maul, and I love that pairing.
Yeah. So just, I guess, in the so what of the grander theme of things, in 2023, Darkseid is on top, right? Darkseid is heavily on top. However, I do think it is really worth noting that 11 of the 14 released primaries currently are represented in that above bell curve win, i.e. they have a 56% win rate or higher. So that's a really, really good player choice and flexibility to play whatever you want and still be competitive. Would you agree, Morgan?
Yeah, I mean, to a limited extent, it's not whatever you want. I think you'd struggle to play Dooku, Ahsoka, and Cody and have a 71% win rate. But in terms of primaries, the 11 of 14, you've got to like one of those characters out of the 11 of 14. Grab one of those and grab another, 2 of the 11 and go nuts. And you've got an above average, competitively performing team that really your losses then are you learning how to get better. So that to me is good player choice. I mean, it's almost all of the primaries you can plug and play, and away we go.
Which is fantastic, absolutely. And I guess in terms of what we could offer to players to form strong competitive teams with, picking up a second squad box to suit their style, I think Vader, Dooku, and Maul are really the ones that offer the excellent utility. And for the reasons that we've said above, right? They all have they all have ranged and melee attacks. They've all got some form of good combat trees and good board impact. Though Maul is probably the most utilized or most utility providing character there with some diceless displacement as well.
Yeah, look, so if I was to advise someone based on these stats who is getting into the game, I'd buy the core box. And if you want to go Darkseid or Separatist, get Dooku as your single expansion. And that's a great sort of setup. If you want to go light side, I would say core box and Luminara is a pretty strong way to go. I mean, the Vader Jedi Hunter is on the nose for some people for the price wall, I suppose, to access it. So in terms of a bang for buck, core box, Dooku, and Luminara are excellent expansions for competitive teams.
Great. Yeah, I think that's a really good summary of what's doing well or what did well in 2023. So thank you for participating in that with me, Morgan. I think that was a really comprehensive breakdown. And if you guys want to dive in any deeper with us, of course, jump on our Discord. Now, Morgan, before we move into closing thoughts, just in terms of what we just talked about, anything that you want to add? Anything that you want to talk about extra?
I'll say on Vader, because I think you hit a good point on Vader there. Now, I've played Vader in 2 of these seasons to success and won both of them. I do think he's probably the easiest primary to play. When I play Vader, I feel like I'm on autopilot, and it's not very tactically challenging for me to pilot Vader, which is kind of good and kind of bad. It's good that it's easy and you can do it when you're fatigued and stressed and whatever else, but it's kind of bad because it gets a bit dull. Not dull, but it's just repetitive. His play pattern is repetitive. So he's a very strong plug-and-play character that has a low... I suppose you don't need much skill to access his full potential. Whereas other characters like Talzin or these reactive ones, you potentially need some skill to orchestrate the reactive abilities. Whereas Vader's very proactive and just sort of go forth and conduct violence, which, I'm a simple man and I have simple goals, so I like Vader.
You're a simple man trying to make your way in the galaxy.
That's right, with a red lightsaber. So yeah, I mean, Vader's a straightforward character. He's powerful. He appears a lot in the top primary pairings. He's behind a bit of a paywall, but he does things well, which is violence.
Love it. Love it. So, again, I think we can wrap up the sort of deep dive on the stats, and I hope that that's a really good resource for the community to have a look at in terms of what to play or what to be prepared to play into. Maybe, the theme is CanCon and some other events here in 2024, January, Australia. But just before we close out, what do we think is going to impact these stats? I mean, we've got Darth Vader, Emperor's Servant, and Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker looming on the horizon. Do you expect them to make a massive splash? Or, what are your brief hot takes of those kits?
Well, Tom, I think this could be quite thematic. We have the Empire on top, but can Luke Skywalker offer a new hope? I don't know. Maybe he does. maybe. I'm sorry, that's a bad dad joke. But look, I do. One of the things I really do like. I've only played with and against these guys once online. What I really liked about the early thoughts on these new characters is that I feel a lot of the characters at the moment, early in this game's life, are relatively simple. They're relatively straightforward, and they have a few little hoops you have to jump through, but there's not a lot of complexity to them to get the most out of them. I feel like the new Vader and the new Luke offer players the ability to grow and to, I suppose, have to level themselves up to unlock their full potential. There's a lot of options and a lot of different ways I think you can play these characters from the strategic sense about how you approach the longer game as opposed to click and hit with Vader at the moment. The new Vader, I think, is a thinking man's Vader. And the new Luke, I think, offers a really interesting play style with his multiple attacks. So I like that AMG are amping up, I suppose, the player skill and ability levels to unlock these new characters. So I'm excited. I have no idea what they're going to do to the meta. Probably, jump in that bell curve somewhere and do good stuff, but it gives us more choice and it expands the game, which I'm really excited for.
Fantastic. And I think I am aligned there. I'm really excited, and I'm really excited to experiment with them in 2024 as well. And perhaps go back to Darth Vader Asajj, just see how that goes. If you could pick one squad to experiment with in 2024, January, February, what do you think you'd take, Morgan?
Oh, come on. Seriously? It's Vader, baby.
I shouldn't have asked. Of course.
Yeah, it's Vader. So I'm really keen on the new Vader box, and I'm very excited for the Moff Gideon, Death Trooper, Dark Trooper. So I want to play a full Empire team, which I can't at the moment unless it's the Inquisitors, and they're passable, I think, with the new Vader, but they're still undercooked. But yeah, the new Vader box, man, I'm super excited for these Stormtroopers.
Yeah, awesome. Well, look, that will do us for this segment. So, Morgan, thank you so much for joining me. We're going to move on to the CanCon breakdown and advertise some of the events that are coming up here in January in Australia. But Morgan, anything else that you'd like to say as you close this out?
Mate, thanks for having me on. It was an honour and a pleasure to be on your first cast, mate. And I don't know, we've known each other for how long? 10 years-ish?
10 years, yeah.
Thereabout. So it's good. I'm really glad you're into Shatterpoint, mate, and I'm really proud of the content you're making. Like the commentary you do on the videos is excellent on your game coverage, and I'm really pleased that you've dived in to do a podcast. And I really look forward to listening and watching how this plays out. But that aside, mate, that's all from me. Live long and prosper.
Terrible. Okay. Thank you so much, Morgan. And you will become a regular on the cast, which is really, really cool. So expect more from Morgan in the months to come. Cannot wait to have you joining us more often.
Alrighty, to close out our first episode and something we plan to make a regular segment, we're going to cover some upcoming events for Shatterpoint from around Australia. And joining me on this is Tom, obviously, and a bastion of the Australian Shatterpoint community, Michael, or Winter AU on the socials. Michael, thanks so much for joining Tom and myself on this episode.
Thanks, Cam. Very happy to be here. It's the first episode. I'm honoured to be a guest in the first episode. It's amazing. Thank you.
Making history. No, that's fantastic, Michael. Thank you so much for joining us. Look, as Cameron said, this is something that we're going to do a little bit regularly. In fact, every episode, kind of regular. We just want to make a habit of advertising events. So as Cameron said, this is going to be a bit of an Aussie theme, but I'm just going to talk about some upcoming events in January. So first up, if you're in Melbourne and fancy an upcoming Shatterpoint event, head to the Gaming Verse on Queen Street on the 7th of January. And then if you're in Adelaide, head over to Tabletop Warfare in Prospect on the 13th of January. So essentially, I can just rattle those events off and it doesn't really mean anything. But this is also an opportunity, I think, for you guys to jump in and join the Shatterpoint Australia Discord. And that's a really good way to keep up to date with all of the upcoming Australian events. And Michael, you actually made that Discord. So that's an amazing community resource. Yeah. Anything else you want to add about the Shatterpoint Australia Discord?
No, I think just to emphasize what you said, Tom, please, if you play Shatterpoint in Australia and you're interested in finding a community, growing your community, please join the Discord. That's what it's there for. It's there to connect people in Australia who are interested in Shatterpoint and want to play with other people.
Do we know what the demographics are so far? Like where do we need to have a little bit more of a push on Shatterpoint in Australia, Michael?
So definitely we've got a lot of people from New South Wales, Queensland and Victoria. Not so much from the other areas. So WA, Tas, South Australia, they're sort of the areas where we'd love to get some more people. We do have some international people. I don't know if they're planning to fly in for CanCon, but if so, that would be great. Yeah, of course.
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, of course. It's a fantastic event, or it's going to be a fantastic event.
Oh, awesome. Well, I think on the topic of events, one of the things I'm actually really curious to hear from you on, Michael, is what excites you about Shatterpoint, and then with that excitement, what actually is compelling you to run events and make things like the Aussie Discord server?
So, look, I listened to your episode 0, guys, and it was a great episode 0. And I think, the things that you were saying about Shatterpoint are pretty much the same for me. So, like, the things that I really love about Shatterpoint is, one, look at Star Wars. I sort of grew up with Star Wars. I'm an older player, and really did grow up with the original trilogy, sort of as my childhood. So one, I just love everything Star Wars, always have, and Shatterpoint, I think the game itself is just so fun. It just has everything that I'm looking for in a skirmish game, in a miniatures game. The miniatures are fantastic. I love to paint them. I love seeing them on the board. Love playing with them, but the gameplay is also just really fulfilling. I think the tactical nature of the game is something that really appeals to me. So look, I just really, really, really love the game. And so I think for me, it's kind of, if you want to see something happen, sometimes you just have to do it yourself. So, like if you want the community to grow, sometimes you just have to, start to build that community. And so I think that's been my goal with Shatterpoint. Like I've played a number of other games over my 25 odd years of wargaming. And I think, another of the AMG games, MCP, that was one that I sort of dipped my toe into. But one of the issues that I found with that was like, it was a struggle to find a community. It was a struggle to find events. It was sort of like a once a month thing, and it was always on at a time when I couldn't make it. At least that was the only community that I found that was sort of nearby. So with Shatterpoint, the thing that I wanted to do was to, bring the community together as much as I could and make events that would, suit different people, and really get the word out there, because I love the game, so I want more people to play it. And so far, I think it's been really successful.
Oh, it definitely has. So yeah, look, we'll definitely put the link to the Shatterpoint Australia Discord in the episode show notes. So absolutely go and check it out. There are stacks of things that Michael have set up in there. There are find a community pages for each state in Australia. And there's also an international and an online community finder as well, which is really, really helpful. And it's just a great way to stay up to date with the community, share your paint jobs, share your content creation as well, anything really. And Michael, you've done a really good job in setting that up. And most importantly, I guess, to this episode is you can use that Discord to keep up to date with CanCon. So Michael, where, when, and what is CanCon?
Right, yeah. So CanCon, I think, look, I would say it's the biggest gaming con in Australia. Now, maybe some people would argue with that, but I would say it's probably the biggest one. It's the one that I'm most familiar with people traveling from interstate to attend it. So it's always in Canberra, ACT, so the capital of Australia, and it's over the Australia Day long weekend. So for this, it is now this year because we're now in January. So it's Friday, 26th of January, Saturday, 27th, and Sunday, the 28th. And Shatterpoint is running on the Friday and Saturday.
Incredible. I'm very excited. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be attending, but I know everyone is preparing for this event. And I think an important part of that preparation is what is the format? This is a big event, Michael. What format are we running for Shatterpoint?
Yeah, good question, Cam. Look, I've done a number of events in Sydney locally, and I've also attended a number of events in Sydney, and they've all been 1-day events, and generally, sort of three rounds. And I think for that sort of 1-day event, 3 rounds, the showdown rules are really good for that. So that's just you bring one strike team, so 2 squads, and you use that strike team for the three games over the day. But CanCon, what the vision was is let's have a big event. Let's try and get as many people that are keen on Shatterpoint from around Australia attending this event, and kind of make it maybe it's the national event. So it's 2 days. We're looking at definitely 5 rounds, potentially 6 rounds, depending upon the number of players that sign up for that. And we're going to be using the Premier Showdown, the rules, so that they're the organized play rules that AMG have put out. So that's where, instead of just having, your one strike team with 2 squads in it, you actually have to come up with a list, and the list has to have 4 squads in it. And you have to play each of those squads at least once across your 5 or 6 games. So I think it adds, another element to the game, makes it really interesting. You got to make some hard decisions. You got to decide, what sort of approach you're going to take for your 4 squads. And I'm really excited by it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Obviously, I'm not playing, but I think watching and seeing what plays out is also going to be super interesting and super fun.
No, I am equally as excited as well, especially for my first Premiere format, and I think a lot of people's first Premiere format. Now, Premiere format and OP and those big words and big convention, they sort of sound daunting to a lot of players. What can the community expect from this event? Is it going to be really competitive, or is it sort of open for anyone? What do you envision here?
Well, look, I think, it is going to be open for everyone. I think all the events that I've run, all the events that I've participated in, everyone has been really fun and friendly, really open and welcoming. So, look, if it's I've only played a few games, but, I really love Shatterpoint, come along. It's not like you're gonna, have somebody punching you in the face to beat you in the game, right? Like, I think all the community so far has been super friendly, and the rules are still the same as always. But I guess what I'm looking for is to make this, the number one Shatterpoint event in Australia. So on the Australian calendar for the year. Starting off the year with a big bang and making it sort of like the premier event for Shatterpoint. So I think there's definitely people who are competitive in the community. You've been speaking to Morgan in this episode, and he's definitely one of those competitive players. So there are going to be some competitive players there, but it's not like a cutthroat kind of event. I think it's still going to be really fun, really welcoming. There's going to be cool prizes. So yeah, I think come along if you're interested in Shatterpoint. Definitely sign up and definitely come along.
Sounds super fun. But I've got one question for you, Michael. I've got a few, but here's one of them. I've got an inside man at AMG, and I'm actually going to get, the box of Fearless and Inventive and Fear and Dead Men. Those boxes come out on the 26th of January, but I've got an inside man at AMG, and I'm actually going to pick them up early. Am I able to use them? Are they going to be legal at CanCon?
So I have just released the player pack for CanCon, the Shatterpoint event at CanCon. So they won't be legal. So we're going with pretty much everything that has been released up to now is what's going to be legal. And look, maybe you do have the inside line, Cam, but I did see a post from AMG saying that those boxes may be delayed in some territories. And whenever we see that, I think you often find in Australia, we are one of those territories
We
where
are
those
always, yeah. Always.
No, that's great. So another question, and you guys might know this if you're following along on the Slugs Discord or indeed the Shatterpoint Australia Discord. I love to paint. Painting is something that I've been doing for a long, long time and something that I take a lot of pride in. Michael, does everything at this event require a paint job? Do I have to have all painted models to play?
You do not, Tom. So look, this is, I guess, as officially sponsored by AMG as we can get in Australia. So the local distributor is sponsoring the event, which is great because we're going to have awesome prizes. And so they would love for everything to be painted. And like you, I'm maybe a full spectrum gamer, so I like all aspects of the hobby, and I also enjoy painting. So there will be a best painted prize, but you do not have to have everything painted. So if you've just got your models assembled and want to play some games, then sign up, come along, have some fun. You don't have to have everything painted.
That is very inclusive. I appreciate that. As someone who has not fully painted their core set yet, I really appreciate that approach. A really important question. Do I need to be bringing my terrain or a game mat or any other peripherals required?
Look, you definitely need to bring everything that you need to play. So you need to bring your 4 squads. You need to bring all your cards. You need to bring all your dice, your movement tools, your measuring tools, all that sort of stuff. You definitely need to bring all of that. You do not have to bring the terrain. You don't have to bring a mat. I will be trying to make sure, and look, I'll make sure that we've got enough terrain, enough tables. If you do have, like me, and you're just a maniac, and I've got 3 or 4 tables, I can bring them along because I'm driving down and they'll all fit in the car. Please reach out to me on the Shatterpoint Australia Discord server and let me know, because I would love for you to bring along some tables, just so that we've got some variety potentially across the tables that people will be playing on.
Yeah, great. That's a really good idea. And as Michael just said, it's another opportunity to jump on that Shatterpoint Australia Discord. The players pack that you mentioned as well will also be in there.
Yeah, so that's up there now. I will also be posting that on Facebook. But yeah, it's on the Discord server. And I suspect that LPG, which are the local distributor, they'll also post out some links on Facebook to those player packs.
Amazing. Well, it sounds like so much fun. I am incredibly excited that I will be able to attend. So that is really cool. The one thing that I did forget to ask, or we forgot to ask earlier, the boxes that are going to be legal at CanCon, what about Padawan Ahsoka? Is she an exemption or an exception to the rule?
Yeah, so for this event, what I've decided to do, just because, obviously Padawan Ahsoka, she was a pre-order bonus that some people got, so some people got it, some people didn't get it, even though they pre-ordered. I think that just speaks to the popularity of Shatterpoint. But so what I've decided for this event is, if you want to play Padawan Ahsoka, but you weren't fortunate enough to pick her up, you can use the Ahsoka Tano Jedi No More model as your Padawan Ahsoka model. So that's the one model that you can proxy. Otherwise, yeah, as it's a official event sponsored by the distributor, all the other models should be the appropriate ones, except for you can use Ahsoka Tano as your Padawan Ahsoka model.
That makes me even more excited because that means that I can run my tried and true Annie, Obi, Ahsoka, Rex.
Top four winning Annie, Obi with Padawan Ahsoka.
Exactly. So that's really good. Now, Michael, unfortunately, you're not able to play. But if you were going to be playing, what do you think you would have brought to the event?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is. I think you could have a whole topic on what you would take in the Premier Showdown format. So I've had some thoughts about what I would take. I think look, what I really enjoy at the moment is Mother Talzin and Lord Maul. I think they're lots of fun. They let you play, you have a really strong active turn with Lord Maul, and then you have a lot of reactive play with Mother Talzin. So I think those two would be, two of the primaries that I would have in two of my squads. And then, look, I really love Obi-Wan. He's sort of probably my favorite character in Star Wars. So I'd probably then look to have another two squads that were Galactic Republic focused. So I'd take Obi-Wan. And then, the last squad, it's hard to decide. I think maybe it might upset a few people, but potentially Darth Vader in that fourth squad.
You cannot do that.
Look, I've got two Darth Vaders. I've painted one black. I'm in the midst of painting the second one white as a Darth Vader redeemed. So that would be really fun. I've also had success with both of those strike teams. So that they're probably, if you were if I was able to play, that's probably what I would take.
I'll let it pass if you bring Vader redeemed. That's cool. That's got swag.
I'll allow it anyway, Michael. Don't listen to Tom.
Thanks, Cam.
So, given that you're not playing, obviously, what are you actually hoping will win? What do you think? Whether you think it will win, or what do you actually hope wins? If they're two different things.
Yeah, interesting question. Look, I think Morgan has been a force to be reckoned with in the TTS leagues. So, maybe whatever he brings will be successful.
Fair enough.
What I hope would win, look, I think one of the strengths of Shatterpoint is that a lot of stuff is going to be competitive. We don't have a game where there are primaries and units that just flat out stink. Nearly everything is competitive, and if you play them well, you're gonna, have some success. So I would love to see either some core box stuff. So, something like, a classic Lord Maul Ahsoka with the Mandos. It would be amazing to see that win. Something based with that strike team in there. That would be cool to see that win. Otherwise, I think I would love to see Tom's, Anakin and Obi-Wan perform strongly because, people have been saying Annie's got some issues, but, I think in the hands of a strong player, I think we see Annie and Obi in particular go really well. So I'd love to see them also perform well.
Pressure's on. The pressure is on. No, that'll be really cool. I am, of course, hoping to do as well as possible. And, of course, hoping to bring my boy, Annie, and my other boy, Obi, because, as you've said, Michael, they are two of, if not my favorite Star Wars characters. So it's really cool to see them performing so well on the tabletop as well. Now, Michael, we've talked about your visions for Shatterpoint here in Australia. We've talked about all the stuff that you've done for the community. What are your other goals? What are your broader goals for Shatterpoint here in Australia in 2024? You are a bastion of the Shatterpoint community, a pillar, if you will.
That's very kind thing to say, Tom. I don't know if it's true yet, but look, I hope that CanCon is successful. I hope that the people that come along have fun and want to come back. I hope the game keeps growing. I hope the community keeps growing. And I think that's one of the things that I really love to see through the Discord is all these communities popping up, so that if you are new to the game and you're like, maybe you got it for Christmas, or maybe you just came across it and went, oh, what's this? I love Star Wars. This looks cool. And you pick it up, you can find people to play with. So I want the community to keep growing. I want the community to keep communicating, right? So that people can find people to play with. And what I would love to see is, more events. And I would love to, have some, regional events. So, we could have like a Queensland kind of main Queensland event, a main New South Wales event, main Victorian, WA, SA, like wherever we've got a good community, if we could get those kind of big events happening, so that, we could, it's just a bit of fun, right? Like it's whenever we're playing these miniatures games, I think we need to keep that in mind. They're just a bit of fun, but it's great to have like, oh, that's the Queensland champion or the New South Wales champion. And then they come along to CanCon and then we can get the Australian champion. I'd love for the community to be in that position where we kind of have that enthusiasm and fun displayed in the community.
And then every time Morgan walks in, you just have the Darth Vader theme play.
That would be very cool. Maybe that's something that I could look at for CanCon.
That'd be great. Thanks for taking that on board. Very thankful for your time, Michael. We just want to know now, is there any closing thoughts you have, any people you want to thank? Obviously, it's understood you're thanking us, so you don't have to say that out loud. But if there's anyone else you want to thank or any closing thoughts you have, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, look, I do want to shout out to you guys. So I think it's great that there is an Australian, and look, maybe there are some Australian podcasts that are focused on Shatterpoint that I wasn't aware of. If so, I'm sorry. But look, it's great that you guys have stepped up to the plate, and you're doing the podcast, you're doing your streams, you're doing your videos. That's awesome. I want to thank Tom because, he's been helping me out with the organization on the Discord. He's been helping me out with the, planning for CanCon. So definitely thanks for that, Tom. Scott from LPG, so Let's Play Games, they're the local distributor. He's helping out with the organization and the prize support and all that sort of stuff for CanCon. So, thanks to Scott. And then I guess where I mostly play is the Combat Company down in Mortdale in Sydney. So thanks to everybody at the Combat Company for hosting all the events that I run there, because that's where I've been growing the community myself.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us, Michael. It's been a fantastic segment to have, and I think exploring events globally, but here in Australia as well, would be a really good feature to have. Just a couple of reminders: definitely go and check out the Shatterpoint Australia Discord run by Michael. Again, I'll put the notes or the link down in the show notes. And of course, we are advertising the 7th of January event at Gamingverse in Victoria and the 13th of January event at Tabletop Warfare in South Australia, alongside CanCon, of course. Cameron, did you have any closing thoughts?
No, I just want to say thank you, Michael, for all the effort you've put in so far. The game's still very young. We all know that. There's still a lot of growth to happen. And I think it's people like yourself and those around the world, around the country, who are putting in effort to run these events that are really making the growth happen. That stuff does, like you said, it doesn't happen by accident. It doesn't happen without effort. So I think, a big thank you to you. And I really hope some more people are inspired by this interview, at least, that they can also start running events. Because it's not, there's a lot of effort that goes in, but I think, it seems very daunting for people when it comes to running events, but really it just takes a bit of guts, to just have a crack, have a go. And obviously people know how to reach you via that Discord if they have questions about how to run events. I'm sure you'd be happy to field those questions. It can take a little bit of pressure off you in the long term.
Yeah, for sure. Like, if you've got any questions, please reach out. And look, I think you guys said I just use Longshanks, and Longshanks pretty much does all the heavy lifting for you. Other than that, it's just getting terrain, laying out the tables. That's pretty easy, and then you just push some buttons in Longshanks. It's not rocket science or anything like that.
It's not like doing a podcast. I mean, a podcast is difficult, mate. It's a lot more than just pressing some buttons. Let me tell you that.
Podcasts, video streams, Twitch, like that's serious rocket science, guys.
Oh yeah. Thank you for recognizing it. Really appreciate it.
Happy to. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on.
No, thank you so much, Michael. As always, you've been listening to Space Slugs, a Star Wars Shatterpoint podcast. Wherever you're listening to this, give us a review, give us a thumbs up or a like or a subscribe. Go check out our streams and our YouTube channel. All the links are, of course, in the show notes below. And if you're feeling extra generous in the 2024 year, go check out and join our Patreon. It would go directly into the channel and help us immensely. Thanks so much, and we can't wait to bring you more Shatterpoint content.
The ability to destroy a planet is insignificant next to the power of the Force.